Thank you very much for this lively introduction and for inviting me to this very impressive event, Kefu Dagen. So I'm happy to give you a presentation the state of digitalization in Germany, specifically looking at the local level. So we did some research at Potsdam University. You might know Potsdam is close to Berlin, a bit smaller, but we have a special focus on public administration there in our research, and specifically on the local level of government. So what I'm going to talk about today is not, as you can see here, the federal level. So this is just to give you a brief idea and impression on how the German system is built up. So we have the federation, which is in terms of public employment not that important. So it's about 15% of employment, of public employment. We have 16 states, so the Länder, 16 Länder, with their own administration. They embrace roughly 50% of public personnel, roughly, mainly including teachers and police officers. So this is about 55%. And what I'm going to talking about today is the local level, municipal level. So I have colored it in red. We have about 100 county-free cities, we call them. So they are independent from a county. These are the bigger ones. And we have smaller municipalities at the very bottom level of the system, about 11,000, with an average population of about 5,000. So you see the average municipality in Germany is rather small compared to Sweden, which also poses some problems. So when I will talk about the digitalization, it's more on the bigger cities. It's more on the cities with more than 15,000 inhabitants. So this is our sample. This is what I'm going to talk about. So do we have a problem with digitalization in Germany? Maybe we have, because in international rankings regarding digital service delivery of the public sector in total, so the public sector in total, you can see the red column here, which is Germany, is not one of the front runners, whereas in Sweden you are. According to this table, you can see Sweden more on the top countries, whereas in Germany we have a problem, and there are huge debates. Why is it like that? What can we do? What can we learn from other countries? And why do we have this problem? And what can be done about it? So that's the starting position. So why is it so difficult in Germany to advance digital issues? So maybe one explanation is the federal system. So this slide is in German, but you don't have to understand it. Just have a look at the image you see here. This is how digital policies are organized in Germany. So it's not that easy to understand, and I think many of these actors do not really know each other and how to coordinate with each other. So you have on the one hand federal institutions, various federal councils, agencies, commissioners working on digital issues, and their number is increasing with digital agencies, councils, and so on. On the other hand, you have 16 states working also on their own agendas of digital service delivery, with their own commissioners of data protection and their own responsibles for various technical and technological matters. And then you have the municipalities, of course, these huge numbers, and all try to coordinate more or less with each other. And that's maybe one of the problems, which is sometimes called also the federal mess. So we have to see how we can cope with this problem. But it's maybe one explanation why sometimes it's a bit difficult to get a digitalization advance in Germany. Well, what I'm going to talk to you today is the local level, local governments, local public services, and we're taking the example of the so-called one-stop shops, the Bürgerämter. One-stop shops in Germany are organizational units of the local governments, and they mirror our tradition, which is similar to the Swedish one, of having a broad a profile of functions, a broad spectrum of services to be delivered. These local one-stop shops, they popped up in the 1980s, and then they spread over the country, and today all municipalities with more than 15,000 inhabitants have a kind of local one-stop shop where services are bundled, where there is a kind of single window access for the citizens to come to the municipalities, so they deliver various services from passport, certificates of marriage, driving license, car registration, and so on. So citizen-related services. They are regarded, compared to other institutions, specifically federal and state institutions, as quite advanced in terms of digitalization and e-government. But I will show you that this image of being advanced has also a counter side, and that the effects so far conceivable are not always positive. So this was one of our research questions. How far has digitalization advanced at the local level, specifically in these local one-stop shops? And what effects can be discerned so far? This will be the major focus of what I'm going to be talking about. The local one-stop shops are facing increasing challenges, and that's why the question arises whether digitalization could be a solution for their problems, for their challenges. So there are more and more bureaucratic burdens. Citizens' expectations are raising over the time, so citizens are demanding more, they are expecting more from the public sector in general, and specifically from the local level. Partly, employees are also dissatisfied with working conditions, which has to do with work overload, growing work intensity, fiscal constraints also, and fluctuation, personal fluctuation. So we have also a staff problem in these units. So is digitalization maybe a solution to these problems, or to some of them, or rather what we call a fatal remedy? So are there some unintended or side effects? Just very briefly on the methods, what we did in this research. We did 3 types of surveys. So we had a huge city survey in Germany with all municipalities, cities with more than 15,000 inhabitants, a staff survey in 2 cities, and a representative citizen survey in 3 further cities. And this was complemented by roughly 30 interviews in these cities. So that's just the empirical basis of our research. Well, starting with the citizens' expectations and the citizens' views on these local one-stop shops. You can see from this slide we have a comparison between expectations and reality, expectations of the citizens and their experiences. And you see quite a difference between these 2 dimensions, which is maybe obvious and no surprise, but having a closer look on the various variables, on the various items, you see some expectations are fulfilled quite nicely, such as friendly employees, friendly, helpful staff, competent advice. So citizens seem to be quite happy with this. But there are other items, such as waiting time, processing time, and also online options, where we have quite considerable differences between expectations and reality. So something seems to be wrong also from the perspective of the citizens. Here you see once again the differences marked in red. So processing time, waiting time, and user-friendly online options are those items where expectations and reality clash the most, or show the most differences. We also wanted to know how advanced are local one-stop shops in digital service delivery. So what is the level, what is called digital maturity? So how far are they? And as you can see from this table regarding the most important functions of local one-stop shops, such as passports, residence parking permit, housing benefits, registration of residency, so these services which are bundled and delivered by these units, that for almost all of them, you can have information available on the internet. So to find information on the internet as a citizen is not a problem. But it gets more and more a problem when you want to at least partially proceed something online, forms, emails. And there's almost none service available which can be fully processed online. So that's the last column here. Only criminal records, then a little bit of vehicle, car registration, we have a higher percentage. But in general, this function of really fully processing services online without media discontinuities as a user-friendly digital service, this is not the fact in Germany. So we don't have that basically. Now on the effects, this is one major focus of the project, that we wanted to know digitalization vis-a-vis the user, the citizens, but also inside public administration for the employees. What effects have been caused so far? And this table shows you the perspective of the staff members, of the employees. And what was really surprising was that the positive effects which we expect from digitalization were rated lower by the employees than the negative ones. So this is something we didn't really expect. Of course, employees appreciate positive effects, as you can see here, increase of transparency, for instance, also a reduction of the attachment to usual opening hours, so they are more flexible, they are not bound to opening hours and so on. But on the other hand, you see what we would expect, reduction of workload. It's just a minority who says, yes, this is actually happen. It's just a minority. And if you look at the negative effects, there's even an increasing majority of employees saying, yes, this is something which affects us in a negative way, such as being constantly available, such as technical problems arising, difficulties with software, with poor quality of service providers. And finally, also, they observe an additional processing time per case. So additional time, this is something we would not expect, because digitalization is to speed up procedures and to reduce processing time per case. So, but from their point of view so far, these positive effects have not really materialized. So that seems to be a problem. Looking more into depth into these findings, so duration of proceedings due to digitalization have strongly or fairly strongly increased from the point of view of almost 70% of the employees which have been surveyed here over the last 5 years. So why an increase of the duration of processing time due to digitalization? So something seems to go wrong here. And we have, of course, to look for the causes, which we not all can answer, but this is first a descriptive finding to show what's going on there and how it's perceived. Problematic effects in terms of being constantly available, increasing workload through email traffic is also perceived as being a problem due to 60% up to 80% of the employees. So increasing workload through email traffic in the back office for the employees instead of being relieved by work. And from the employees' point of view, what actually is digitalization? From a practical point of view, how do they perceive and how do they experience digitalization in everyday life? Not in a vision of how it could be in the future, but how are they affected by digital issues? And the majority says that basically it's electronic responses to citizens, it's writing emails. this is digitalization in their practical life. And quite a majority also says, yes, it's scanning of documents and electronic storage. And then what's working quite well, we must say in Germany, it's online appointment scheduling. So this is an instrument which is quite widespread, and all municipalities say, yes, this is something which is working and which is also appreciated by citizens. So online appointment scheduling is also part of the everyday life. But so what we would expect from digitalization, for instance, the complete electronic processing for citizens without media breaks, this is actually not happening very, very frequently, and you see there's not so much support from the perspective of the employees regarding this issue of complete online proceedings. So from their perspective, this doesn't happen that frequently. Now, another interesting finding is on age groups. This, again, regards the citizens. So we looked at the citizens here, the citizens' perspective. And we asked them whether they would support an expansion and extending of online services and why. And we made a differentiation between various age groups, so the younger ones from 18 to about 30, then from 30 to 50, and 50 plus. And you can see from these slides, from the slides here, that the support for expanding online services is much higher in the younger generation than in the older one, which of course supports findings we already know from the digital divide, from the digital age divide. So younger people are expecting more advantages from expanding online services than the older one. This is quite clear from these slides, specifically time saving. For all groups, time saving is the most important issue, but for the youngest, it's more important than for the older one. And this is even more telling, this slide, because we also asked, is there maybe a problem of extending online services from your perspective, from the citizen perspective? So do you see any dangers or any problems from your point of view, according to which you would say, we should probably not extend them, we should probably stay with what we have? And you see these problems which are articulated by the different groups are much higher rated by the older generation, again, than by the younger one. So more elderly people think that the use of online services is too complicated, much more elderly people than younger ones. Face-to-face consultancy is needed more in the older generation than in the younger one, and also the personal contact to local administration seems to be more important for the elderly generation than the younger one. So again, we have this age divide or this generational divide according to age groups, quite obviously from our findings. So I summarize the results found so far from our project. Most of the citizens' employees are in favor of more online services. Time saving is the highest expectation. So most of them want to save time, which is true for 90% of the citizens, but more for the younger ones than the older ones. For 80%, user-friendly online services are essential requirements for local services, but only about 50% see this requirement to be fulfilled. So we have this gap between expectations and experiences. Often we also realize that those services which are offered by the local governments do not correspond to those which are expected by the citizens. For the citizens, often it's a different kind of services which are important, which are more frequently used, and which concerns their day-to-day life more than those which are offered actually online. So there's a gap also between offer by the public sector, the local public sector, and need by the citizens. As said before, information is quite frequently available, but we have only a very small percentage of services which can fully be processed online. And interestingly, also in the German context, I don't know how it's the case in Sweden, there is no single service, a local service available which can be carried online in a uniform way across Germany, in the one-stop shops, in the whole of Germany. So it's really a fragmentation of different systems, of different styles, of different kinds of service delivery and technological solutions. So we have this real patchwork of technologies at the local level. It's interesting that only 10% of the citizens actually use the local electronic access, although it is available. So only 10% use it. So why? And as I showed you, because half of the population will not do without personal advice. So huge groups of the population who are still in need of this personal advice or prefer it. Prefer their personal contact. And what's also interesting in terms of usability of services, that 90%, almost 90% of the citizens would make use of digital services of the municipalities if they were as easy to process online as platforms like Amazon, Zalando and others, Otto, the German one. So if it was that easy and user-friendly, they would use it. But if not, they leave it. They go to the administration. That's also a problem in terms of usability of the current online service, which have many problems and access staffs We have this distinctive generational effect, so I have already told you about. From a staff's perspective, of course, positive effects are appreciated. So there's a higher transparency. Processes are improved, simplified. This is appreciated by a majority, yes. The online appointment scheduling, as said before, is really a success story. So all are in favor of this model, and also citizens appreciate it to make their appointments with the municipal administration online and not in a traditional way. But there are also problems. About 40% think that workload was not curbed. The negative effects predominate the positive, so prevail the positive. Processing time per case has increased by, from the point of view of many employees. There are problems with their working conditions also, which they evaluate rather negative as constant availability, email flow, and so on. Higher work pace and stress situations and so on. So we also have to consider this side of the coin when talking about digitalization. Of course, positive effects will arise if it's done in the right way, but we also have to be aware of the risks and what can happen, actually. And finally, I would like to show you this slide because probably you have the same debate in Sweden about specifically from the municipalities' point of view, about whether digitalization could lead or will lead to more centralization and standardization, and whether this could cause a risk for a highly decentralized system of public administration as yours and as ours, where municipalities are very strong. And we have for both arguments, we have statements from our interviews and from experts. So on the one hand, one could say standardization, centralization is a good thing and should be pushed by the state, in Germany by the Federation and the Länder, And because uniform procedures are important, specifically when it comes to delegated state tasks. And in Germany, the municipalities pursue or assume a huge number of delegated state tasks. So these should be processed uniformly, and digitalization could contribute to this uniformity. And there are good examples of standardized digital service, such as registration of cars. So some of the local managers would welcome a more centralized digital system through online portals and other uniform services. And therefore also they are in favor of increasing the pressure to local governments and to state governments to push in the direction of more standardization. So this is one part of the argument. But there are also others saying this is a risk. This is really a danger for our decentralized system of autonomous municipalities. Because the state, and specifically the federal level in Germany, is too remote. They don't grasp how things work in practice at the local level. So digital solutions should come from the bottom, from the grassroots, where the experience with practice and with citizens is. And so the federation and the state won't be able to provide these kinds of solutions. So a bottom-up strategy is needed from their point of view. Street-level knowledge is indispensable for a well-functioning digital solution. So from their point of view, it's more a bottom-up process. It should be more bottom-up process, and they perceive centralization and standardization as more as a disadvantage for the effectiveness of local service delivery. So this was a brief introduction into what we learned about the digitalization at the local level in Germany. I hope it was interesting to you. Thank you very much for your attention.
And thank you so much. A couple of questions. Very interesting to listen to you. I wonder, the expectations, where do they come from?
The expectations regarding the digital service delivery?
Yeah.
From the citizens, of course.
Yeah, but I mean, is it in some way the globalization that you can see how it works in different areas?
Yes, there are various pressures also coming from outside. I mean, showing these index, these rankings, of course there's external pressures. So how can it be, so politicians, decision makers are complaining, how can it be Germany in the last group of countries, just briefly before Bulgaria and Croatia? So this is a pressure, also a political pressure, coming from the international community, but also from political decision makers themselves.
Yeah, but yes. and the citizens, do they think, oh, I went to the Google website and I think this is something we should be able in my municipality? Do you think
yes, I think they are expecting. Yes, they are. Used to very easily processable services from Google, from Amazon, and so on. So they ask themselves, so why isn't it possible with my municipality? Yeah. Why isn't it possible with my driving license and with my car registration? Yeah. Of course, there's a kind of expectations they bring to the public sector.
Do we need to compete on that arena?
I don't think we need to compete.
Could we arrange other rules? No, that's the private sector. It doesn't work like that.
No, I think no competition. It doesn't make sense. I think it would be good, really, to offer something more user friendly, and also to raise the acceptance of the public sector by the citizens. I think it would also contribute to trust and to acceptance of public service delivery by the citizens. This is something we should do, and not compete with the private sector. I don't think that would make sense.
What about, can you see any differences between, if you compare the countryside and the bigger cities, expectations and what kind of service they actually get?
Yeah, I think we also have this urban-rural divide, and it's an increasing issue, not just in digital terms, but also politically and economically. And therefore, I would say digitalization could also be one of the solutions of bringing the urban and rural world a bit closer together.
Yeah.
So in Germany, we refrained from territorial mergers of municipalities and rural areas. So digitalization could be a solution to do without these huge-scale territorial reforms. So yes, I would say it can help to bring together these two worlds.
Yeah, because we see that development all around the world. We have Brexit, we have the situation with Trump elected, and in many countries around, but we have all the struggle between countryside and the cities.
And this divide between urban and rural, it shows itself in various facets.
Yeah.
So and the digital issue is one of them. The political is another one, but you know, this divide is an important phenomenon across many European countries, and we see it in Germany too.
Yeah, and also you showed how how different generations, how they react and how they behave and what they expect.
Yeah.
But also that comes into the when it comes to the how we divide societies. We take Brexit, for example. We have the elderly people in the countryside definitely pro-Brexit, and the younger people in the cities pro-stay.
Yeah, so this generational divide through age groups corresponds to some extent with the urban-rural.
Yeah.
So the rural areas are more populated by elderly people who cannot move anymore, who stay in their villages, whereas the younger one go to the cities. So we have the same phenomenon.
Yes, and from that, what would you think would be the best way? Because otherwise we will have, our nations will break down totally if we can bring this together.
Yeah.
What can you say? The best examples where they are successful of bringing this together. Can you see anything from your statistics?
It's difficult to say where they cope with this problem, because it's still an ongoing debate where solutions are not yet there. So therefore, from my experiences, I don't really have a concrete example where it really worked. There are several solutions to be discussed, such as bringing more digital services there, or also having some offices, local one-stop offices in the rural areas as well. So these are some attempts to resolve the problem, but actually I don't think that it has been resolved.
Yeah. Can you see any areas where you shouldn't really use digitalization in that way, because it's better keeping it analog? It's not worth going, because that's the one of the few areas where we should keep the human touch, human contact.
I think in all services where the human touch is needed, where there's where you don't have these routine procedures, because what I showed is more routine procedures, registration and so on. You can routinize this. You can have algorithm systems. But for all those services where the personal contact is needed, where personal advice is needed, where you have complex cases, there can be complex cases where you need to have a human assessment. Take the migration issue, the refugees. So it's not possible to have these integration concepts, case management issues in a completely digital way. Digital issues and apps can help, but they are not the only solution. So in some of the personal-related citizen-related services and complex cases, decision cases, where you have discretion as a civil servant, you need to have discretion. You cannot do it only with this digital solution. You need the human being to be there.
Thank you so much. Any questions from the auditorium? Anyone who wants to? Yes. Do the mics, do they work? Ni ska ha mikrofoner. There's a button, I believe.
Hello?
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 Your name and the
hey.
you represent?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Torben. I work in Malmö Stad in the municipality there. Municipality, difficult word. Yeah. So,
right.
I'm curious if you have heard any discussions on when it comes to the low usage and people being not happy with the solutions as citizens. Thinking about low knowledge and incompetence in the municipality in ordering those kind of digital solutions as one reason. and the inside-out perspective that you have this is how we work. We do the solution for ourselves and not for the citizens. How that has been discussed.
Yes, that's part of the discussion. So one part of the discussion concerns exactly what you said, that there are online offers which are provided by the municipality, but this is not what citizens expect. So this is not what they most frequently want to have. So there's this clash between offer and expectations, demand, offer and demand. And it's discussed. Why is it like this? Because also municipalities do not really take into account the perspectives of the user. They think from an offer perspective, but not from the user perspective. And I think that has been neglected when designing these services, but also actually when passing new laws at the federal level regarding digital service delivery, because the federation passes also framework legislation concerning these issues. And if this is not designed by a user perspective, by how citizens expect it to be, then it won't work. They just simply don't use it. It clashes with their expectations. And the other thing, why don't they use what is already offered? Is also because many of these offers do not work very well. So we have this what we call media discontinuities. So you start with an online service, and then you have to draw to the paper again. Then you can put the paper in a scan or whatever, and you go again to the digital process. So there are several of these breaks from analog to digital, from digital to analog, and in one process it doesn't work without this. And so this is something which is not user-friendly, and therefore they say, okay, this is even more workload, so then I just go to the municipality. And that's part of this problem of lacking user-friendliness and media discontinuities, which is also a legal problem. So we have to reduce in Germany, I don't know how it's in Sweden, but we have to reduce this written form requirements. We have many written form requirements ruled out by federal legislation. And so this is also a problem. So municipalities say, but there's a legal obligation that people come to us. They must show up. And they have legal form that they must sign in a traditional way. They have documentary obligations, show their certificates and so on. And therefore, there's also a legal issue involved here.
Sabine, and in the end, we all need a fax machine. That's what I heard. Sabine, thank you so much for joining here. And
thank you.